Okay, so we're talking a little bit about social media influencers, and there was one last thing I wanted to cover over, and this is actually due with the reading that I gave y'all, which I think is really influential, even if you don't use social media influencers that much, and understanding that a lot of what you're going to be reading for social media influencers is out there. And I'll be the first to tell you that it is out there. Um, because what ends up occurring is we're dealing with probably a much younger generation. So when you were looking through your first set of readings for week one, you notice from the Hootsuite data that actually we've got a bit of a movement in terms of how social media works. So your SMS messaging type social medias like your Snapchat are actually moving to younger generations. Same thing with Instagram. Whereas Facebook, for instance, goes into your much older demographics as well. So we're starting to see a change in terms of how things work, in terms of how things are presented. And I'm going to talk about one aspect of it that's a little weird. And if you're reading through, this is, again, part of my dissertation that I wrote, and this was published in the Journal of Interactive Advertising just recently. And this actually talks about vaping. So I'm not going to say too much on what vaping is. For a lot of you, you may not be even that, I wouldn't even say influenced, but even that interested in the aspect of vaping. In fact, I showed this at a job interview one time, and a faculty member looked at me and said, "What in the world are you showing me? This isn't advertising." Because it wasn't explicit. They didn't actually say, "This is an advertisement." Which even in this case, they wouldn't have to say based on FTC guidelines. Even EU guidelines don't really get into some of this stuff that I was looking at as far as the videos are concerned. But it is interesting how when we're talking about this kind of stuff, that one of the things I mention is, we talk a lot about demographics, we talk a lot about psychographics, and the one thing that kind of came up in this is I said, look, I understand your concern, I understand that you don't like this, I understand that you may not think this is advertising, but this is not for you. This is not your demographic. What's being shown, which were these big clouds of vapor going up in the air from these vape pens, was not based on your demographic. That's another thing that really I want to mention as far as the posts are concerned, is some of this stuff is not going to be for you, and that's okay. Because your audience isn't always going to be within the people that you know the most. Okay? So when we talk about things like anonymity, one person mentioned, the whole aspect. Someone mentioned catfishing at one point, and I thought that was really interesting that someone brought that up. Mainly because when we talk about some of this stuff, we've got to think about what are some of the trends within these younger generations or older generations, and how much can you fake being a part of that demographic. So the anonymity kind of goes away when you realize how much can I actually talk about being a different demographic. My professor used to say, I honestly, even if I wanted to, which I don't, if I wanted to pose as a 13-year-old online, it would be hard after a while. So if you think of longitudinal sense, it would be very difficult to convey myself because of all the experience that I have, and based how I was when I was a teenager, things have changed and things are different. And so thinking in the mindset for an advertiser and potentially interviewing some younger generations may come into play here in terms of understanding your audience a little bit more. So anyway, again, this is talking about vaping. So I don't know if any of y'all are vapors. I own a vape pen. I don't use it. Only because I wrote a dissertation on it, and it was kind of for solidarity purposes. But I've never actually used it. I don't smoke. But it was, in 2014, the Oxford Word of the Year, vape, which was kind of interesting. And it's got a popular trend. It's actually growing since I wrote this. So when I wrote this, it was like 2016, 2017. And I thought it was starting to die out. It has gotten more and more popular as we have progressed. And one of the things you might look into as to why do people believe that? And one thing is through focus groups within vapors, I'm going to go a little off topic here, is that they perceive it as a healthier alternative to smoking. Now, there is really no scientific data to, there's no scientific data to back that up right now. In fact, this is where research are starting to get into if it's even worse for you than smoking. And that's not abundantly clear right now. So the big thing is it is a popular trend. It's separate from traditional tobacco, and vapors will be the first to really get that information out, is that it is different from traditional tobacco. But there's a big online community with it, and there's an influence of vapors of people who do tutorials of tricks, and you can go online and see any of these. They're called cloud chasers. So go on YouTube or Google and type in cloud chasers, and you will be it will at least be interesting to see what some of these people are doing. I would sit there and go, this isn't for me. I'm not interested by anything that's being done here. I will say it takes a level of skill to do some of the things that are being done and some of the tricks and so forth. However, it's not for me. So, but it is interesting in terms of the industry, in terms of popular mediums like YouTube and Instagram, what used to be Vine, because Vine doesn't exist anymore, but TikTok has really came up with that as well. But this is talking about social media influencers, and this was shown up with one of our students mentioning the whole aspect of credibility, and credibility specifically with doctors, physicians, sales reps, for instance. And in this case, they become kind of these niche-based credible sources, kind of like some of what y'all were talking about with how-to videos in the YouTube community, which I thought was an interesting term. Which within this YouTube community, a person can watch and get a message from somebody who is an expert in that field. So they almost become niche-based celebrities because they're posting on YouTube. Now this goes into, and you'll see this within the article, this whole Taylor strategy wheel. Okay, and so this Taylor strategy wheel has 6 sections in it. I'm not going to go so far into them because you can read and look through these, but I'll give you kind of a synopsis of them. There's 2 sides, transmission as well as ritual. Transmission has rational, acute need, and routine. Rational would be, let's say you're looking at all the features within a car and a car commercial. So if you're analyzing an advertisement, you're taking in all the message, you're taking in all the arguments. It has a lot to do with the elaboration likelihood model of central processing. So that means we have a motivation to listen, we have the ability to listen, and because of that, we can really listen to a message. So there's that big difference between hearing something and actually listening to something. So in this case, in rational, we're listening to all the arguments being played here. Next is acute need, which is I need something right now. I will be the first to admit that I don't know a whole lot about cars. I know some things, and I've replaced some things by myself within cars. However, I don't think about brands of spark plugs when it comes to cars. So this becomes a acute need, and I buy it based on what people tell me that I perceive as credible. So this actually goes into that YouTube community again. I used to have a Ford Explorer, and I had to replace a light a tail light, and I didn't know how to do that, which is really easy, by the way, but I didn't know how to do it, and so my dad lives in New York, so I couldn't contact him at the time, so I went on YouTube and found a video that really got into this particular it was a 2003 Ford Explorer, which is what I used to drive. And it was interesting because when I was looking through it, the video, they mentioned a very specific bulb. I don't remember what it was, but they mentioned a very specific bulb. And because this person had thousands of subscribers, hundreds of videos talking about fixing cars, I was inclined to say, you know what, I'm going to go in and buy that specific bulb. So there's that influence when it comes to acute need as well as the role of credibility. Then there's routine. Now, routine doesn't necessarily mean you have to buy it once a week. So, like through Amazon, they've got those little clickers for like a laundry detergent. So laundry detergent would probably be a good routine product. However, it can be something along the line of, during Thanksgiving, for instance, that you always buy cranberry sauce during Thanksgiving. I mean, that's kind of a tradition. So that is a routine. It's just a routine and a much larger breadth of longevity. The other thing would be sensory, which is any of your senses. So whether it be haptics based on touch, whether it be your olfactory senses with smell. These are probably some of my favorite ads because they are the advertisements that actually have like one of those like cologne ads when you peel back. I was going to do like a scratch and sniff. When you peel it back and you can actually smell the cologne or the perfume that's being advertised here. And I think that's really cool because you're actually bringing in the senses within that advertisement in particular. Then is Ego, which is an I am me product. That's how they label it, is I am me. Do you have any products that kind of identify you? And a lot of these have to do with computers or cars, many things that you would consider part of your identity, part of your buying pattern. And they're also high, they're products that last a long time. Mine in particular is Burt's Bees. I'm doing like a shameless promotion right now. But again, it can be even something that's a low, I want to say low risk, but low involvement. That's the word I was looking for. And then it's social. Now, social usually has this appeal of family that goes along with it. So pizza commercials do this a lot of having pizza with the family or with friends or at movie night with your friends, etc. But the area I want to get into is when I talk about message strategy and some of the research questions here, the biggest thing is that a lot of things that are being mentioned here are within that community of vaping. And we perceive it as people that we don't actually know. So this is where the idea of parasocial interactions and relationships come in. Now, it's important to realize the difference between a social relationship and a parasocial relationship, as well as interaction. So parasocial interaction would be if all that you were seeing within this class was me talking to the camera. So if I was just talking to the camera and you weren't allowed to comment to me, you were just listening to these videos and you would write a paper and that would be the end of the class, that would be parasocial interaction. It's this perceived interaction between you and I. Now, what's really interesting about this is not a new phenomenon. This actually came up in 1956 when they were looking at newscasters that were presenting, and people had these strong bonds with the newscasters. They felt trustworthy. It's the same with the meteorologist. They felt that they were trustworthy giving the weather. And so, I mean, if you're in this area, Ray, from Ray's Weather, might have a little bit of a parasocial relationship. I don't talk to Ray much, if at all, but it is something that I trust said person because that person is the expert. And again, that goes into that physician argument. But it also might have a little bit to do in terms of that interaction. Now, the fact that I'm interacting with you on social media, that actually turns it into a social interaction. So we see that within YouTube, we see that within Facebook, Instagram. That's what separates what we've known forever about mass communication and presenting a major message to a big audience. Nowadays, it's much more niche related. And it's not to say that we don't still use television to get that message across to big audiences, but now we can actually take that one step further and be able to communicate with a much smaller audience as well. And it's almost preferable because these are the people that are going to be engaged. So that's the first one. The second one is talking about relationships. Now, I don't know you aside from what's being said in the post. And that's kind of the vice versa with me as well. The more we talk, the more we have these social interactions, the more we get a better sense of who we are. So when you don't really know somebody and you're having this one-way relationship, so this is wanting to see somebody again, wanting to pursue them. So in the case of vapors, people would go on their Instagram, they would subscribe to their YouTube, they would go into their TikTok, they would talk to them on Instagram and Facebook, etc., etc. But what would end up happening is they would feel this bond with them, that I want to see them all the time. So, and this would bring up a really interesting ethical dilemma, as a lot of you have expressed that the social media interactions are very face value. And if that's the case, then the argument here, and I would really be interested in what y'all have to say about this. The argument would say that these relationships are face value because you don't really know this person. And dealing with streamers all the time, and I deal with a lot of streamers who broadcast video game Let's Plays, which just means that they're playing the game and having commentary over it. People going to see these, going online to watch people play video games, which I know, there's a lot of people that talk to me about, like, you watch people play video games, which I'm like, I also watch televised sports. It's no different from me playing basketball and me playing basketball. Why would I actually want to watch somebody play basketball? This is a really bad point to make up in North Carolina, which go Hokies, by the way, especially since my Bison lost. The thing of it is when we're dealing with these parasocial interactions and relationships, again, it's one way. So many of these streamers, many of these YouTube content producers are saying, I don't have this experience with some of my fans. I do with some of them because I know them, but others I don't. So this is where that parasocial relationship comes in. It is that one-way communication. And this, we'll get into some weird stuff. I don't want to mention this just because it's so much of it's a weird part of social media that it's growing, but in many cases, I don't think a lot of the students here really would be comfortable with some of the topics of people moving into the relationships with artificial intelligence. I'm going to stay away from that. The other thing I'll mention as far as parasocial celebrity advertising, you'll see this in that article, is in terms of feeling that parasocial interaction. Because this is what we found. We found that a lot of people felt like they not only were interested in what was being said by the influence, but they also were feeling this interaction to the point where they wanted to watch them more, and they perceived credibility. Now, credibility in this case can work in two different ways. One is what we know as likability, which can be broken up into a lot of different things. It can be attractiveness, it can be charisma. Those are usually good things to start out with, but they are almost always short-lived when it comes to the longitudinal spectrum. So it doesn't last very long. Credibility and truth, if you will. Now, truth obviously is a bit of a hard topic to really nail down, but this is the kind of thing that when we're talking about this, the aspect of truth in this case and the aspect of credibility towards the specific topic that they know. So they're not going to listen to any old celebrity. So I had a focus group member that said, look, if LeBron James came out and said, I use this vaping pen, I don't care. It doesn't mean anything to me because LeBron James is a major celebrity and he's a basketball player. So I would think that this person is, trying to sell me something. Whereas a small niche-based celebrity based in the vaping community might seem more credible because this is what this person is dealing with day after day after day. So they seem more credible in this case. So you start to see this in terms of brand loyalty, sales, and my personal favorite, which we talked about briefly. Some of y'all mentioned in the comments a term that I like to use, which is mass personal communication. It seems like word of mouth. So when you have a person that's giving this, so if I'm promoting my Burt's Bees here, it can be the notion of me just giving a genuine recommendation rather than a paid advertisement. And I'm not getting paid by Burt's Bees. I wish I was. That'd be pretty awesome, but I'm not. I just like using their product. And so that statement right there, that message that I just delivered, would be an example of what we're dealing with here in terms of that word of mouth. Because again, it feels like, I hope, provided you're watching these entire videos, you may not, provided you're watching these entire videos, you may have this sensation of actually feeling like we're having a conversation right now. So, and I hope that that's what's being delivered. I don't know. I find myself tedious at times, so who knows what's going on with that. But the big thing is understanding that this is the basis of that social interaction that I talked about within this particular paper. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed the read. I know it was really weird, and I think it's something that is beneficial. So, let me know what you think of it. Let me know your comments, and I'll probably talk to you all in a couple hours. I need to go eat breakfast, but I'll probably give another video or two today, and then post these up on As You Learn. So, hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you soon.